That year, a prince was born into silk and splendor, the son of a great and powerful king. From the moment he could walk, he was raised to be a future ruler. But before he even turned 20, at the break of dawn, he was dragged from his bed, taken into a silent tent, and strangled with a silk cord, on the orders of the very father he worshipped. No betrayal, no rebellion, no crime. He was guilty of only one thing: being born. This is a true story about Prince Mustafa, the beloved son of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and the victim of one of the most terrifying laws in Ottoman history, the law of fratricide. Under this terrifying decree, the rightful heir to the throne was not only allowed to kill his brothers, he was expected to, not out of hatred, not out of vengeance, but in the name of stability. Because in the Ottoman Empire, having multiple princes meant one thing: civil war. So to prevent chaos, they legalized murder within the royal family. And here's the most chilling part. This wasn't a hidden, secret practice. It was state policy. The law was first enforced by Mehmed II, the very man who conquered Constantinople. He believed that preserving the empire required eliminating potential rivals, even if those rivals were your own blood. So from that point on, Ottoman princes didn't just grow up learning diplomacy, warfare, and leadership. They grew up knowing that one day, they might have to kill their brothers, or be killed by them. In this world, your birthright wasn't a gift. It was a death sentence in disguise. If you weren't the chosen one, your life was simply considered too dangerous to be allowed. And that's where Prince Mustafa's nightmare began. Mustafa was the eldest son of Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the most powerful and celebrated rulers in Ottoman history. His mother, Mahidevran, was a beloved consort, not a legal wife, but respected nonetheless. From birth, Mustafa was seen as the natural heir. He was intelligent, well-educated, a skilled warrior, and a capable leader. Most importantly, he had the loyalty of the Janissaries, the elite military force of the empire. To many, he was already a king in waiting. But everything changed when Hurrem Sultan entered the picture. Hurrem was not just beautiful, she was brilliant, strategic, and dangerously ambitious. Unlike Mahidevran, Hurrem became Suleiman's legal wife, something almost unheard of in Ottoman tradition. And one by one, she bore him sons. But there was a problem. As long as Mustafa lived, none of her sons could ever wear the crown. Hurrem knew this, and so she played a much longer, much darker game. She worked her way deep into the political machinery of the court. She allied herself with Rustam Pasha, the Grand Vizier, and her son-in-law. Together, they began to build a web of rumors, manipulation, and forged letters, all pointing to one thing: that Mustafa was plotting treason against his father. Now, Mustafa wasn't perfect. He was powerful, popular, and yes, independent. But he was also loyal. There's no real evidence that he ever intended to betray Suleiman. Still, whispers began to swirl through the palace walls. Mustafa is gathering support. Mustafa wants the throne now, not later. Mustafa is dangerous. And once doubt entered the Sultan's mind, it never left. Suleiman, the father who once adored his son, began to question everything. Every letter, every meeting, every moment of silence. Behind the silken curtains of Topkapi Palace, a quiet war was raging. But it wasn't fought with swords or armies. It was fought with words, fear, and carefully planted lies. Mustafa, still believing in his father's love, had no idea that the empire he was destined to rule was already preparing his grave. In the shadows of the imperial harem, a war without swords had already begun. Whispers echoed through the palace corridors. Mustafa is plotting against the Sultan. He's building alliances. He's waiting for the right moment to strike. But no one knew where the rumors had started, or who was behind them. Some believed it was Hurrem Sultan, the ambitious queen, working alongside her son-in-law, Grand Vizier Rustam Pasha. The theory? That they had forged letters, communications between Prince Mustafa and Suleiman's enemies in Persia. These letters, dripping with the language of treason, eventually made their way into Suleiman's hands. And suddenly, everything changed. Suleiman, the man who once held his son in his arms, who trusted him to lead armies, who spoke of him with pride, began to look at Mustafa with something new in his eyes. Doubt. A secret investigation was launched. Suleiman demanded answers, intelligence, clarity. But the truth was murky. The letters couldn't be definitively authenticated. No spy came forward with solid proof. And Mustafa, for all his power and presence, never acted like a traitor. Still, the idea had already taken root, and in the Ottoman Empire, where betrayal lurked behind every silk curtain, where loyalty could be faked with a bow, and where ambition wore the mask of obedience, paranoia was deadly. Because in this world, the only thing more dangerous than being a traitor was being suspected of being one. And Mustafa, brave, beloved Mustafa, was now a threat to the very throne he had once been promised. Rustam Pasha, acting as Grand Vizier, began pushing for immediate action. He advised Suleiman that hesitation would be fatal. If Mustafa truly was planning to seize power, they had to strike first. And so, Suleiman made a decision, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In 1553, the Sultan led his army on a campaign into Persia. From the battlefield, he sent word, "Call Prince Mustafa. Bring him to my tent." It was framed as a normal summons, but many in the royal court, and especially in the military, sensed something was wrong. Advisors quietly urged Mustafa not to go. Some begged him to stay behind, just in case it was a trap. But Mustafa, loyal to the end, replied, "My father is called. I will go." He believed in the bond between father and son. He believed that truth would protect him. He believed he was safe. He wasn't. As he approached the camp, the Janissaries cheered for him. Even now, they loved him. But that night, the camp grew quiet, and in the early morning hours, Prince Mustafa entered his father's tent alone. Inside, the guards were already waiting, and what happened next would go down in history as one of the most heartbreaking betrayals in the entire Ottoman legacy. The body of Prince Mustafa lay motionless on the floor of his father's tent. No ceremony, no honor, just silence. Outside, the wind swept across the Persian plains. But inside that tent, the center of the Ottoman world, something had changed forever. The executioners disappeared as quickly as they had come. The white silk cord, a weapon of quiet death, was tucked away, its work done. Moments later, Sultan Suleiman stood alone, staring down at the son he once called his pride. The man who had ordered conquests across continents had just ordered the death of his own flesh and blood. Word traveled fast. At first, whispers among the guards, then shock in the Janissary ranks, and then rage. The Janissaries, the elite soldiers who had marched under Mustafa, who had trained him, who would have followed him into war, were furious. Some wept, others clenched their fists. A few openly cursed the name of the Grand Vizier, Rustam Pasha, whom they believed had orchestrated the prince's downfall. But the damage was done. In Istanbul, the people mourned. Mustafa had been their hope, a future ruler who was just, capable, and strong. Poems were written. Graveside songs were sung. Even now, centuries later, Turkish folk songs still remember him as Mustafa the Martyr. As for Suleiman, he returned from the campaign not as a triumphant emperor, but as a haunted man. Eyewitnesses said he became withdrawn. He rarely spoke. He rarely smiled. One historian wrote that the flame behind his eyes had gone out. It was said that at night, he would sit alone in his private chambers, staring at nothing, lost in thought. He never publicly acknowledged the death. He never punished the conspirators, and he never again spoke Mustafa's name. But there was one verse, found years later, scribbled in his personal notebook, that revealed everything. "You were my light, and I your shadow, but I extinguished the flame." In the end, the fratricide law had done what it was meant to do: secure the throne, prevent civil war. But at what cost? A beloved son was dead. The Sultan's legacy was stained, and the Ottoman court, once ruled by loyalty and order, became a place of suspicion, manipulation, and fear. Hurrem Sultan's sons would go on to rule, but from that day forward, the palace was never the same, because everyone learned a chilling truth. In the Ottoman Empire, you didn't need to betray the Sultan to be executed. You only needed to be born with royal blood, and sometimes, just being loved too much was enough to get you killed. In the days after Mustafa's execution, the Ottoman Empire did not rejoice. It trembled. In the streets of Istanbul, whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into riots. Crowds gathered near mosques and marketplaces, their voices hushed, but angry. They didn't blame Mustafa. They blamed Hurrem Sultan and her powerful ally, the Grand Vizier and her son-in-law, Rustam Pasha. Mustafa was innocent. He was framed. They killed the rightful heir. But no one dared say it too loudly, because in the Ottoman Empire, words could kill just as easily as silk cords. Still, the tension was undeniable. Shops closed early. Men disappeared in the night. And in the royal palace, the heart of the empire, paranoia spread like wildfire. Sultan Suleiman never publicly addressed the death of his son. He gave no speech, no eulogy, no justification. But those closest to him noticed he was no longer the same. Gone was the radiant, strategic genius who had led the empire to its golden age. In his place was a man, haunted by a decision he could never undo. He stopped smiling. He rarely laughed. He aged faster, walked slower, and according to his court poet, Suleiman began spending long nights alone, surrounded by silence. In one of the Sultan's private poems, discovered after his death, a single line stood out, scribbled in the margins. You were the light of your father, and I, your executioner. But even as Suleiman mourned in private, the war within the palace continued. Hurrem Sultan, now the most powerful woman in the empire, pushed forward. Her sons, especially Selim, were groomed for the throne. Selim was cunning, indulgent, and nowhere near the military leader Mustafa had been. But Hurrem didn't need a warrior. She needed a survivor, and Selim would survive. Years later, he would ascend the throne as Selim II, known to history as Selim the Sot, a ruler more famous for wine and women than war and wisdom. Many believe the empire began its slow decline under his reign, and still, the law that killed Mustafa remained untouched. The fratricide law, created to prevent chaos, continued for centuries. Brother would kill brother. Princes were strangled in cribs. Newborns were smothered before they could speak, all in the name of stability. And yet, the very system meant to protect the empire's future was eating it from the inside. Historians would later say that Mustafa's death marked a turning point, not just in Suleiman's soul, but in the soul of the Ottoman Empire itself. Because if the brightest prince could be murdered in silence, what hope did anyone else have? The message was clear. In the Ottoman palace, loyalty did not guarantee safety. Love did not guarantee mercy. And being born royal did not guarantee life. Sometimes it guaranteed death. Mustafa was everything an empire could hope for in a future ruler: brave, brilliant, beloved by the army, and deeply loyal to his father. But in a palace ruled by fear and silent rivalries, being perfect wasn't protection. It was a death sentence. He didn't rebel. He didn't plot. He didn't sin. He simply existed, and that was enough. Because in the Ottoman Empire, power wasn't just absolute, it was paranoid. And the closer you stood to the throne, the more dangerous it became to breathe. What killed Mustafa wasn't a blade or a war or a rebellion. It was a system designed to protect the empire by destroying its own bloodline. And the most terrifying part? He died not because he failed as a son, but because he succeeded too well. In the end, Mustafa wasn't a traitor. He was a threat to someone else's ambition. And in a world where even the purest intentions can be twisted into suspicion, sometimes living the right way, being the right person, loving the wrong people, is the most dangerous thing you can do. And for Mustafa, it was the last thing he ever did.